Hi everyone, Chris Martinson of peakprosperity.com, and this is your weekly wrap-up. Wow, what a week. So we're in the first week of the Trump presidency and the Dow hit 20,000. Lots of excitement around that. Coincidence only that the national debt hit 20 trillion in the same week. So we have a pair of 20s to begin to work with here, and maybe 2020 hindsight is what we're going to focus on in a couple of months. Because look, I can't believe that we're seeing the markets, and air quotes here, markets continue to power higher given what we're seeing in the landscape. Trump has got all kinds of, Japan's worried about their trade balance with the United States because Trump's focused on that. Mexico, Trump's put them clearly under fire, huge trade imbalance issues going on there. He's got Europe under fire. Europe doesn't know what's going on anymore. You've got Gorbachev, former president of the former USSR, talking about how this is as close to world war as he's ever seen. None of these things, including increasing tensions with China, none of these things are conducive for the idea of piling risk on into assets. So what's been happening? Why is the stock market continuing to go higher? Two ways to look at this, I think, none of which are mainstream. One, this is the final blow-off stage. All bubbles are just in search of a pin. So these bubbles are just expanding, and they need a certain phase called the final blow-off phase. And this isn't just equities. We're in a really peculiar phase where we're experiencing maybe a lot of different blow-off bubbles, including the fact that the credit bubble is the big one. That's the one we're tracking. The fact that the world has been expanding its debt and its credit faster than the rate of growth since the late 1970s, early 1980s. So we didn't really have a housing bubble. We didn't have a tech bubble. Those were side bubblets on this larger thing that had been growing along, which was our inability to face the idea that we had to live within a world of limits. And one way you can have that delusion persist is to continually jam interest rates lower and lower and lower and lower so you can borrow more and more and more and more. That cycle has been running since the early 1980s. And here we are, it broke in 2008, and rather than face that, we're like the drunk that just backed over the third dog in like 3 years, and we're just like can't manage to square up with that. Instead of facing what happened in 2008, which was seeing the bursting of bubbles, what did we do? We chose another round of self-delusion, rammed interest rates even lower, printed up even more money, all in an attempt to pretend we could live beyond our means indefinitely. Now, you can't do that economically, but as I keep harping, you can't do that ecologically, and you can't do that with respect to energy either. That's what we're talking about at Peak Prosperity. Look, it's time to face up to the fact that as a species across the whole globe, this isn't directed at just my US listeners, it's time to grow up. We have to understand that we no longer can go out and party till 2 and pretend as if these bodies we're in are going to last forever. It's time to come to terms with the idea that there are limits that exist out there. We haven't gotten this message yet when it comes economically, and that's the simplest one. That should be easy, right? We're the Dallas Police Pension Fund, and we're going broke, and we can't even possibly make the payments. It's simple math, and still people are struggling with that. Illinois, completely bust from a pension standpoint. California, CalPERS just announced that they have a $95,000 per household deficit in the retirement funds for one retirement fund in California. It's an astonishing number. Those are simple. If it was as simple as taking the math and looking at the math and coming to a conclusion that we have to do things differently, we should be able to do it around something as simple as a pension plan. But we're facing different deficits that are even more complex and more troubling to me, including the loss of the bumblebee, facing the extinction, now on the endangered list, the rusty patch bumblebee. Are you kidding me? Time out, humans. You can't be losing sentinel species that are that important, linchpins, without a sense of what's really going on. Listen, you lose something like the bumblebee, next thing you realize this didn't get pollinated, that didn't happen because that didn't get pollinated, that didn't get reborn because that didn't get reborn, this shifted. It's all too complex. Instead, time for some humility to back up and just say, look, this slavish devotion to endless growth is killing us. And the head priests and priestesses of that particular order exist in the central banks. And they're saying we will do whatever we have to so we can continue to grow. But why? Why do we need this growth? You don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need economic growth. The banks do. So we're enslaved to a money system at this point in time. That's the prime message, one of them at Peak Prosperity. Look, there's not a lot you or I can do about much of this. So We talk about how we can become more resilient. We have 8 forms of capital we like to focus on. That's what our book Prosper is all about. Come to Peak Prosperity as well. I'm talking about in this week, we've got a nice 2-part report, which is making note of something that I've privately been telling people about for years, which is that when I go to wealth conferences, talk to super rich people, they don't have bug out bags. They have bug out jets. They've been building little hidey holes all over the world. And when the super rich people who are well connected and understand financial markets are saying they're scared enough that they're keeping their jets gassed up and ready to fly to New Zealand, you should probably pay attention to that. So that's something that we talk about this week in a 2-part report as well. What we can do about this, given that we can't control financial policy, we can't control monetary policy yet. These are going to impact our futures. What can we do? Those are the questions we're interested in talking about. So subscribe right here, or I think you can press this card up over here, and either way you can find these things that I'm talking about and or subscribe to this channel. Love to see you at Peak Prosperity. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.